After my last conversation with IS-012, I find myself increasingly sympathetic to its plight. It is highly intelligent and appears genuinely benign. Some elements of its story do not entirely satisfy my doubts, but I am coming to believe we may have unjustly contained this creature. If I can verify a few key facts, we may ultimately release it.
The Abiotic Factor universe as we know it is pretty expansive and, at times, pretty convoluted when it comes to piecing together the breadcrumbs the Deep Field team have left for us to learn about the story of the research organization, its immurement subjects, scientists, and adversaries before and after the assault on its operations. And one of the more highly requested subjects I've seen cause the most confusion around is IS-012, or who many of you know as Dr. Cahn, the mysterious scientist who we see throughout our expedition of the Cascade Research Facility with a very familiar vibe akin to that of the strange pill man on the tram. With some new critical information in the recent Dark Energy update, there is still much to learn about the mysterious quote-unquote Dr. Cahn, so let's talk about it. IS-012 is a shape-shifting anomaly / entity that came into Gate possession at an unknown time and under unknown circumstances. The shapeshifter's true identity has yet to be revealed or even hinted at, even up to present date. As far back as records at Cascade show, the entity has taken the appearance of long-deceased senior researcher Dr. Cahn. A man's log corroborating this information details his attendance at Dr. Cahn's funeral personally more than 2 years ago at the time of recording, with the entity remaining to insist its facade as being truthful. So chronologically, the real Dr. Cahn has been deceased for up to 5 years before the game's events. Dr. Mance logs a successful escape attempt the entity had during its time at the Cascade Research Facility, having successfully convinced a new security staff into letting it out of high containment and being found in a staff break room an hour later. Its intentions still unclear but remaining peaceful, it is returned to its containment. But regardless of its seemingly benign intentions, this one incident proves IS-012 is capable of deceit at a somewhat high level, be it as a means to an end or for more sinister reasons. At some point before the game's events, Dr. Mance starts conducting personal tests and interactions with IS-012. Over time, he begins growing sympathetic about the entity, even being charmed at times. Then, something happens that we've never seen in a man's log before. He actually starts considering the release of an immurement subject. For the first time, he questions whether IS-012 really deserves to be contained. And that's a big deal for a few reasons. As I mentioned, this is the first time Dr. Mance has viewed an immurement subject with anything other than strict logic and scrutiny. And if you know anything about him, you know he's an absolute stickler. So perhaps Dr. Cahn, the scientist IS-012 chose to take the form of, is a former close friend of Mance. After all, throughout the game's many emails, plenty of the co-workers and subordinates of Dr. Mance address him in what I would consider informalities, so it's not out of the picture that a senior researcher like Dr. Cahn was a good friend of Gate's research director. That could also explain this sudden change of attitude for what all things considered could be an incredibly dangerous scheming anomaly with an agenda. The grief, coupled with a familiar face, could have clouded Dr. Mance's judgment all this time, up until a critical point. Found in the Gale reactor during our excursion, a chilling and very unique Mance log can be found.
Dr. Mance, Cascade Facility. Further to my previous note on IS-012, the shapeshifter has requested it be released in Antiverse 2. While this is unusual, I see no reason, at this stage, not to grant him a small override. Permanent directive to all staff, all levels. No further communication with IS-012 is permitted. All contact must be reported immediately. If it speaks, silence it. If it escapes containment, subdue it by any means available. In all cases, summon gatekeeper assistance immediately.
Now, this log is incredibly intriguing for more reasons than one, obviously. It's clear IS-012 solidified its camaraderie and trust with Dr. Mance after some time, but the most important thing in this log is 012's choice of vacation, Antiverse 2. It's shaky if Dr. Mance greenlit its visit into Antiverse 2, but his visceral tone in the splicing of his log and the mandate for complete security around the entity paints a pretty clear picture. Whatever happened in Antiverse 2 was serious enough to demand complete silence from IS-012 and gatekeeper intervention. And if you watched my previous video about gatekeepers, along with the added information about Exors and whatnot, we're now privy to the existence of a powerful entity known as IS-117. the creator of the Exor species. If you haven't watched that video, you absolutely should after this one, but to give you a quick summary, IS-117 is an entity first discovered in Antiverse 2. I say discovered in quotations since knowledge of its existence by Gate was mostly hints and breadcrumbs picked up by researchers while prodding the Exor species in Antiverse 2 and its many regions. Word of a presence being felt, strange artificial biology found in said species, and mysterious structures. Its existence is confirmed to us when we visit Antiverse 2.c for the first time, and we see it up close when we visit Shadowgate. And who do we see throughout our second half of the expedition through the Cascade Research Facility and finally Shadowgate? Dr. Cahn. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's talk about our scientist's experience with Cahn and whatever the entity taking his image is planning. First being mentioned in the tutorial of Abiotic Factor, we are told to report to Dr. Cahn after wrapping up our basic training. An interesting detail many players would miss, shout out to DF for this one, but I'll touch on this detail later on as well. First being seen by our players in Containment Block Baird, Dr. Cahn beckons to us like many other scientists we come across in the facility, explaining to our scientists how he'd been hiding in IS-012's containment to keep away from being killed or eaten. Within this short conversation, he mentions his 2 PhDs and his 15 years of experience in the Cascade facility, more than likely in an attempt to seem convincing to our scientists. He then instructs our scientists to reset the laboratory security system for a chance to escape without being riddled with bullets. Most interesting about this first interaction is the very strange symbol scribbled on the floor in front of the entity's containment, which is very prevalent in the recesses of the reactor sector during the assault and later on Shadowgate, note that down as well. Moving on to the laboratory control tower, we swiftly reset the defense system as Cahn suddenly appears behind us and applauds our good work. This is the first blatant hint at Dr. Cahn's anomalous properties. He seemingly instantaneously teleported behind us as soon as we pressed the button. Perhaps he was hiding somewhere in the room or nearby, but if that's the case, why hadn't he reset the defense system himself? After this point, every time we see Dr. Cahn, he somehow appears ahead of us or in places ripe with danger which our scientists have to fight tooth and nail to get through. But alongside the very obvious strange behavior by Cahn, there's tons of contextual evidence in our interactions with him throughout the many times we see him in the Cascade laboratory, which point to a sort of omnipresent side to Cahn. Immediately after teleporting behind us in the control tower, he talks about the vacuum chamber door and the fleshy webbing blocking our way into the security sector, even citing the facility's problems with the substance before, also mentioned in a manslog. But this doesn't line up. Before we reset the containment system, Cahn was still trapped inside his containment room, but as we already know, he somehow immediately appears behind us as soon as we release him. So how is he aware of the vacuum chamber door infestation immediately after being released? Not to mention previous knowledge about both where the vacuum chamber door leads and the fleshy webbing infestation. So perhaps Cahn is an incredibly fast entity, being able to assess the situation with the vacuum door and arrive right behind us as soon as we release his containment, or with a certain degree of knowledge about the facility, the current situation, knowledge about the company as a whole, and a strange ability to nonchalantly persevere the threats in Cascade. Perhaps IS-012 has a degree of omnipresence when a path ahead is clear, but how potent this omnipresence really is still very debatable. The next extraordinary feat of IS-012 is immediately after we open the vacuum chamber, somehow Dr. Cahn beats us into the security sector, despite last being seen all the way in the control tower, and he says the following. Remember when I talked about IS-117? This could possibly be the earliest look at Cahn and the entity's interest with IS-117 and Antiverse 2. But moving on, following us into even IS-059's Shadow Realm, we see Cahn once again fully present in the anomalous Antiverse when he repeats the same dialogue as before. And this one is especially strange, as the Reaper's Shadow Realm is still an incredibly shaky topic. Hard evidence of what it really is has yet to be revealed to us, but with the many theories of it being a mindscape, our scientists' fractured memories, purgatory, or a sort of pocket dimension, Dr. Cahn should not be present and lucid like he is here, especially compared to the other shadows we interact with throughout the Shadow Realm. Another character that corroborates how strange this feat is seen early on in the office sector near the security sector shortcut. Seemingly affected with a sense of amnesia, Alice was left disoriented and confused after assumedly coming into contact with the Reaper and being raptured into the Shadow Realm, yet Cahn remains normal and lucid in future appearances like nothing ever happened. And like I said before, the Shadow Realm is a highly nebulous topic, so perhaps Dr. Cahn was never really present in the Shadow Realm and it was simply a sophisticated memory, but it is an incredibly strange occurrence nonetheless. Moving on to the reactors, IS-012 begins to show more cryptid signs of its true nature with these two lines.
The gate is not far from here at all, just back the way we came. On the tram. Of course. This place is a maze. I won't bore you with how I got down here, but it wasn't easy. You have no idea how thick the concrete is around here.
Knowing about Cahn's teleportation ability by now and his ability to traverse the reactor sector faster than us, this wording seems very intentional, and somewhat confirms the entity's omnipresent abilities. And finally, deeper in after we fight our way into Shadowgate, standing within the confines of the hard light dome near our entrance is Dr. Cahn, where he hints at IS-117's containment without ever being exposed to information about its existence. Again, this wording sounds very intentional, and meeting once again for a last time in front of IS-117's gatekeeper containment, I-012 insists on freeing the Eldritch God under the guise of scientific righteousness, convinced doing so would ground the rift it's trapped in locally and allow exit from the ongoing disaster. With our scientists successfully releasing the Eldritch creature, walking through the rift reveals it leads directly into a familiar setting, Antiverse 2 Point A, the Far Gardens, and returning to the spot where Cahn was once standing during the fight to release IS-117, we see a painted smiley face. Now, it's obviously not confirmed if release into Antiverse 2 through the manipulation and deceit of our scientists was I-012's ultimate goal, but everything leading up to this climax in the story points to it or something adjacent. First revealed in the tutorial, it's still not clear how Dr. Cahn's name was on the onboarding process, but knowing about the entity's omnipresence and foresight by now, it is possible Cahn has been trying to orchestrate its escape by using our scientists even before the disaster at Cascade, somehow obtaining information about our arrival date. The entity's cunning and intelligence is also shown in its containment room. Something I neglected to mention before are the oddly placed bookshelves on either side of the containment door. Perhaps Cahn specifically placed these to block the view of the lightly furnished containment room to create the illusion of I-012 being the bell placed directly in line of sight in the center of the room. But most importantly is Cahn's connection with Antiverse 2 and IS-117. It's still not known what Cahn's true intentions are, if it had some kind of interaction with the Eldritch creature when Mance allowed it to visit the Antiverse all that time ago, or if it's simply a self-serving creature trying to survive by any means. But leaving behind creepy smiley faces and associating with the weird gatekeeper symbols does not paint a good picture for our shape-shifting friend at the end of the day. All in all, I definitely feel like this is not the last time we see this scheming shapeshifter, and I'm excited to see what its end goal is with the freedom it achieved on the backs of our scientists. But anyways, I've been Myriad, your shape-shifting yapper, and have a good day or night. Bye bye.